Hey, this is Chris with Virtual Pokemon League. I'm here to introduce another deck to you. This is Stalling Spores. This is our Parasect deck. We call this Stalling Spores. Here's our drawing. We've got Absol that is throwing a Lily's Pokédoll at the opponent. Meanwhile, Parasect is here holding an ear-ringing bell. Now, there is our drawing for this particular deck. We always have drawings for our decks. Let me explain how this deck is supposed to work. Basically, it confuses the opponent's active Pokemon, and then it has some Parasects down here that add damage to the confused active Pokemon. That's the idea. So confusion is this special condition. Here's how it works. If your Pokemon is confused, you turn it upside down. So instead of being active like this, it's turned upside down like this. And you can retreat, you can switch out of it, anything like that. But if you choose to attack, if you have to flip a coin before you do anything, before you discard a card or whatever, you have to flip a coin if you choose to attack. If you come up with heads, the attack happens as normal. The Pokemon stays confused as long as it's in the active position, and it doesn't evolve or anything like that. It stays confused. But if it comes up tails, the attack does nothing. You don't have to do any discarding or anything for the attack, and you add 3 damage counters to the attacking Pokemon. So sometimes you're faced with this tough decision. If your active Pokemon is confused, you could try to do your attack, but you also might just end up doing nothing, wasting your turn, and having 3 damage counters on your attacking Pokemon. It puts them in that situation, and it's worse. So here's the idea. Here's the ideal board setup. There's a Lily's Pokédoll in the active. Lily's Pokédoll is an item card, but you can treat it as a Pokemon. It's only 30 HP Pokemon, and if it's knocked out, the opponent takes no prize cards whatsoever. So it's great for stall decks that don't want to give away any prizes. Anytime during your turn, if this is your active Pokemon, what you can do is discard any cards attached to it and put this Pokemon face down in the bottom of your deck, and then you'd have to bring another bench Pokemon up to the active. And it could switch with other Pokemon and that sort of thing, but we like to leave this in active, and you can attach cards to it. So what we attach to it is the ear-ringing bell, and this says if your active Pokemon, and Lily's Pokédoll counts, is knocked out by damage, or is damaged at all by the opponent's attack, then that active Pokemon is confused. So it's a way of getting confusion as a special condition onto the opponent's active Pokemon. But there's this way you do it. They need to knock out the Pokédoll in order to get to your real Pokemon. They don't get any prizes, and they end up getting confused. So it's kind of frustrating to the opponent, but it's super fun to play. Now here's what we try to do. We try to put Paras, as much as we can, on our bench, and then we play Parasect, the stage 1 on top of it. It has this Panic Spores ability, and this is what it says. Put 2 damage counters on your opponent's confused Pokemon between turns. And you put 2 damage counters on the opponent's confused Pokemon between turns for every Parasect that's in play. So if the opponent was playing an Absol or something and was confused, then when it comes to my turn, if I've got 4 Parasects on the bench, then we're putting 2 damage counters for this Parasect, 2 for this one, 2 for this one, and 2 for this one. That's 8 damage counters in between turns when it comes to my turn. And if I don't do anything, when it comes back, we put 8 more on the opponent's active Pokemon. That's 160 damage counters. And some Pokemon have immunity from taking damage. Well, putting damage counters on is not the same as taking damage. So if the opponent has a spell tag, that's only activated. That allows them to put 4 damage counters on the opponent's Pokemon in any way they like if that Pokemon was knocked out from damage by an attack. Putting damage counters on that Pokemon is different from taking damage from an attack. So if the opponent's Pokemon has a spell tag on it and is knocked out by Panic Spores, then that spell tag isn't activated. It was just basically worthless. So it's a great way of doing this kind of passive damage that doesn't activate these huge things. These damage activated sort of cards or anything like that. So how do we get this board state set up? Also, I like to play an Absol. In fact, we play 3 Absol. And this is what it does. It has an ability called Dark Ambition. It adds another energy cost to the opponent's retreat cost. So it makes it harder for them to retreat. They can switch all they want, and when you switch, you no longer have that special condition. So they can use switch cards, but you can only have 4 of them in your deck. This makes it hard to retreat. So once they've used up their switch cards, or if they can't find a switch card, it's hard for them to manually retreat if they're a basic Pokemon. It doesn't work for stage 1s, but most of the Pokemon are basic. So you can somehow take up a basic Pokemon that's really big that doesn't have enough energy to do any attacking yet. The Absol makes it really hard for them to be able to ever retreat. And then you can confuse them in some way and just keep loading on that damage with the Panic Spores from your Parasect on the bench. Now, how do we get to this board state? Cynthia allows you to cycle through your cards. Rosa is super important. So Rosa, if any of your Pokemon is knocked out, and with this deck we take a lot of knockouts, especially with Lily's Pokédoll. And Rosa is activated even if Lily's Pokédoll is knocked out. You can, if any of your Pokemon, including Lily's Pokédoll, is knocked out, then you can search your deck for a Pokemon, an item card, and a basic energy card. So what I like to do is if I have a Paras on the deck, I can search my deck for a Parasect, and an ear-ringing bell, or perhaps another Cynthia, and a grass energy, which allows me to do I can attach it and retreat sometimes with an Absol maybe or something like that. Or I can just do Mysterious Powder for 30 damage. Sometimes I use this attack. Mysterious Powder for 30 damage. I can flip a coin. If heads, my opponent's active Pokemon is confused. So it then activates the Parasects. Bill's Analysis allows me to search my top 7 cards for 2 trainer cards that I find there and put them in my hand. That's really helpful. Pokegear allows me to search my deck for, the top 7 cards in my deck for a supporter card, so I can try to find my Cynthia's or my Koga's Trap, which I'll explain later. Netball and Quickball help me to set up. So Quickball allows me to find my Paras's or my Absol. It can't search out Lily's Pokédoll. And Netball allows me to search my deck for either a basic grass Pokemon, like a Paras, or a grass energy card. So it's really versatile. So we play 4 of those. So a lot of basic search. We also have 3 evolution search cards to allow me to find my Parasects. We play 4 Lily's Pokédoll, 3 here and 1 here. And then this stuff is the stuff that allows me to confuse my opponent. So we play 4 Ringing Bell, 3 here and 1 there, and 4 Koga's Trap. So Koga's Trap is a supporter. Your opponent's active Pokemon is confused and poisoned. What that means is that in between turns, poison adds 1 damage counter to the opponent's active Pokemon. So now we're adding 1 damage counter, plus 2 for every Parasect in between turns. And if the opponent decides to attack, that's 3 and comes up with Tails, that's another 3 damage counters on the opponent's Pokemon. So we've knocked out huge 320 HP Pokemon because we've loaded damage on them coming this way, coming from their turn to my turn, and then we've loaded damage coming from my turn to their turn, and then they try to attack, comes up Tails, 3 more damage counters, loads up damage coming back to my turn, and then they're knocked out. Or coming back to their turn again, they're knocked out. So all it takes is 1 Tails and this accumulating damage that does a lot to them. So we've got those supporters. We don't have a lot of draw support here. That's the main problem with this deck. Sometimes we dead draw, but a lot of times we have enough cards that we need to kind of stall out and just survive with respect to our opponent. It's kind of exciting. I would love to add more cards that allowed more dynamic draw, maybe some Jirachis or something like that. The problem is that it takes up bench space, and it's also hard to find that dynamic draw because it takes away from our ability to either set up or ability to confuse the opponent. This is the best balance that I've been able to find. We play, I'll talk about these cards in a bit, but we play only 3 Grass Energy, 1 Beast Energy, and a Recycle Energy. The Recycle Energy is super important. We can do it with something like our Absols or something like that allows us to retreat, and then if it's discarded from play, it comes back into our hand. So we keep it in our hand, which is really nice. I play 1 Mew for bench barrier. This prevents damage to our Parasect. So a lot of our opponents will try to damage the bench and not address the active because the active does nothing except confuse them. So they'll shoot at the bench. We can play a Mew that prevents them from damaging the bench. And we can play Koga's Trap, which confuses them. So even if they try to damage the bench, they still have to flip a coin in order to be able to do that damage to the bench. 3 Absols, which is a lot of Absols, but in addition to the Pokédolls being a barrier, Absols can be a barrier too. We can take damage with that. We'd much rather do that than take knockouts with our Parasects, because those are the ones that actually contribute damage counters to our opponent's active Pokemon. And we play 1 Pheromosa and Buzzwole. So this is a guy who comes in at the end and kind of cleans up everything. Usually it's at the end. The idea is you want to do as much damage as you can with the Paras and Parasects. You take that damage, and then you see what you've done. And then you bring in the Pheromosa and Buzzwole. For 1 Grass Energy, you can do 30 damage to your opponent's active Pokemon and 30 damage to the opponent's bench Pokemon. If they play a Mew, it doesn't do that damage to the bench Pokemon. So it's 30 and 30. Sometimes this is helpful against other stall decks. You can just damage their bench pretty well as long as they don't get that Mew out. It does have the second attack, Elegant Soulkid, is 190, which is huge damage, but it takes 3 energy, and we don't play a lot of energy. Sometimes we can get that. Sometimes we can stall our opponent out with the Lily's Pokédoll, and they just can't get our bench to the active, so we can put it on the bench and add the Jet Punch or something like that and keep Jet Punching, and they just can't do anything, especially if they're confused. They can't do any attacking because they come up with Tails or something like that. We can just keep heaping on that damage. Again, this deck is about incremental small damage all over the place. And then Beast Game GX is the big reason we have this in here. This has only 50 damage for 1 Grass Energy, but if you knock out the opponent's Pokemon with damage from this attack, you get to take an extra prize card. So if the opponent took a ton of extra damage through Confusion or this Panic Spores and is close to death and is just hanging on, maybe they try to attack and they come up with Tails, and then they come to your turn and they took more damage, and so they're near death. What you can do is use Beast Game GX, finish them off, and take an extra prize card. So that's always really nice to take that extra prize card. And one of the energies we play is this Beast Energy, which counts as any energy when it's attached to a Ultra Beast. Pheromosa Buzzwole is an Ultra Beast, and it does 30 extra damage. So it actually increases this 50 damage to an 80 damage. So this way you can do 80 damage, knock them out, and take an extra prize card. So it's a great way to take those extras. And then we can sometimes attack with a Mew, especially since we've got this Recycle Energy or Grass Energy. Just put 3 damage counters on the opponent's active Pokemon. If they're playing a spell tag or something like that, putting damage counters on doesn't activate that spell tag. So if they're close to death, you have a Lily's Pokédoll, and you need to take an extra prize card. At the end, you can put the Mew with the Recycle Energy, take this Lily's Pokédoll, put it in the bottom of your deck, bring up the Mew, and do 3 extra damage. Put 3 extra damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon any way you like to take that extra prize, that last prize. But usually it's there just to protect the bench. What else do we have here? We have a Chaotic Swell. We need to play some sort of stadium card. I didn't want to do a Marshadow with Resetting Hole because sometimes our bench is pretty full. Chaotic Spell is it. And basically this is just because sometimes opponents play the stadium card that's super helpful to them, some sort of Prism Star stadium card. This just is a way of counteracting that stadium card and the next one that comes after it. It basically takes the place of a stadium card, knocks out the other stadium card, and anyone else tries to play a stadium card, this stadium card and that stadium card is discarded. So it's a way of taking away 2 stadium cards just so no stadium cards are in play. I play a Lana's Fishing Rod and a Palpad. The Palpad basically shuffles the Koga's Trap and sometimes the Cynthia's back into my deck because it's helpful to keep their opponent's active Pokemon poisoned, especially if they have the kind of Pokemon that damage the bench. Then Koga's Trap, then Earringing Bell can't be activated because they're not damaging the active, so I have to use Koga's Trap to be able to get them. And if I have enough of those in the discard, I bring them back with Palpad. Shuffle 2, support a card from the discard pile back into the deck. And then Lana's fishing rod allows me to go get something like Parasect and an air balloon, or Parasect and an earring bells. Sometimes that actually helps. And then I have these get out of trouble cards. I have 2 switch and 2 air balloon, 1 here and 1 here. I need to have these because we get knocked out a lot. So we bring someone to the active, we need to bring them back down. So if you have an air balloon, that really helps to do that. Put it on an Absol, which has 1 retreat cost. So it has basically a negative 1 retreat cost. It's super easy. So even if they play an Absol that adds 1 to this retreat cost, still free retreat. And the switch is helpful in case we happen to start accidentally with our Pheromosa and Buzzwole, which has a retreat cost of 2. It's just easy to retreat. And then we play Pokemon catchers, 2 Pokemon catchers and 1 great catcher. Great catchers to great catcher up a really big, beefy guy that maybe they put on the bench and they don't have enough energy to support it. The Pokemon catchers are also for big, beefy people or people that they really depend on, or maybe they're close to death or something like that, and they've retreated. You can bring them up with the Pokemon catchers. Flip a coin. If it comes up heads, then you get to choose your opponent's bench Pokemon to become active. And then you can play a Koga's Trap in order to add the extra damage counters, or use Beast Game GX to take your 2 extra prizes to win the game. So that's the whole idea behind the deck. Hope you enjoyed this intro, and I hope you enjoy seeing us play with this deck on the Virtual Pokemon League. Thanks for watching.